Oh, I can't believe there was this much corruption. So, what should we do about it? I glanced at my boss's calm, refined profile, hoping for a response, but she only bit her lip, looking pale. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Revenge Office. Today, I'm going to share a news story with you. Let's get started. My name is Richard Taylor. I'm an ordinary employee, just stepping into my second year in the workforce. At 24, I'm still a bit of a newbie, but I've recently developed a taste for black coffee, a drink I used to avoid. I've also started managing a small team, finally feeling like a competent, grown up worker. Maybe folks are starting to rely on me a bit more, or so I thought. Richard, can I talk to you for a moment? Just as I was casually enjoying my coffee break, I heard a cold voice. Turning to look, I saw my direct supervisor, Nancy Brown, standing there. Oh, hi there, Nancy. What's up? We were supposed to start the meeting at 3. How long do you plan to enjoy that coffee? Her smile sent a chill down my spine. I quickly checked the clock way past the scheduled time. Sorry, I'll get ready right away. Honestly, get it together, will you? Nancy sighed, crossing her arms. Guess I got a bit too comfortable, and now I'm paying for it. Getting her approval still feels like a long way off. Nancy is 3 years older than me, and she's helped me a lot since my early training days. With her wavy brown hair, she looks every bit the career woman. Of course, her work skills match her appearance. She's excellent at her job. She handles tasks efficiently and leaves the office right on time. Among her peers, she's known as the rising star with the quickest promotions. But she's a bit strict on others. That's the only downside, I guess. She speaks her mind clearly, and because of it, I've heard some higher ups gossip saying things like, such a beauty, but with that attitude, she'll stay single forever. But to me, she's cool, more responsible than anyone, walking her own path without compromise. If she doesn't have a boyfriend, I shake my head, banishing those thoughts. Before anything else, I need to grow enough to support her. With that in mind, I turn to her, organizing the materials we'll need for the meeting. Just then, standing right in front of Nancy was Chris Thomas. Hey, Nancy, got a little favor to ask. With an unpleasant grin, Chris looked her up and down. Nancy kept a neutral expression, responding with, What is it? But I could tell she was uneasy. Well, I've got a meeting with a client, so could you handle this work for me? Hearing this, I thought, here we go again. Chris, who's turning 35 this year, is a veteran in our department and a manager, but he's always pushing his work onto others. Chris, we have a meeting ourselves, you know. Yeah, after that's fine. So, you're saying I should stay late to finish it? Nancy shot a sharp glare at him. But Chris didn't care at all, snapping his fingers with a smug yes. Even Nancy seemed at a loss with his carefree attitude. In the end, without any room for argument, the work was dumped on Nancy, and Chris quickly made his exit. Most likely, his client meeting was just an excuse to go out for a smoke. I knew there was nothing I could do since he outranked me as our manager. Nancy let out a big sigh. Um, I can help you with that. When I offered, she gave me a gentle smile. Thank you, but it's faster if I handle it, so it's fine. I could tell she said it to look out for me. She may come across as strict, but she truly cares about her team. Still, I felt a pang of disappointment. I wondered if I still wasn't helpful enough to support her. One day, as the month end approached, I was struggling with expense reports, staying about an hour late. Just as I finished and was getting ready to leave, I noticed Nancy was also still in the office, which was unusual. I greeted her with "Good job today," but got no response. I started to feel ignored until I heard her muttering, "What is this?" as she stared, stunned, at her computer screen. Curious, I couldn't help but glance at her screen. There, a shocking scene unfolded on the screen, and I couldn't help but mutter, "What?" "Nancy, these numbers are obviously off, aren't they?" Nancy slowly nodded in response to my question. The displayed profits from sales were clearly inflated, even to me. They've definitely been padded by someone's hand. In short, Nancy had discovered fraudulent activities in sales. It's strange no one noticed until now. A lot of people must be involved in this. What on earth is going on? Nancy frowned deeply, clearly distressed. For someone with her strong sense of justice, it must have been even harder to take. The next day, Nancy immediately reported the fraud to manager Chris. Even someone as laid back as him should step up when things get serious. Or so I thought. But then, Nancy called me over discreetly, and I was about to hear an unexpected result. All the records from that time had been rewritten. What? What do you mean? The proof of fraud. It's gone, right after I talked to manager Chris. From the way she said that, it was clear Nancy suspected manager Chris. So far, only Nancy and I had seen the fraudulent records. Chris had said he'd verify Nancy's findings, but then claimed there was no such evidence at all. When Nancy checked again, the proof had vanished. Something was definitely off. If manager Chris was involved in the fraud, possibly with other employees, he might be trying to cover it up before too many people find out. Just then, manager Chris marched up to us. "Hey, what are you two whispering about? Get back to work now." He usually acts easygoing, but today he seemed irritable. Since then, he'd been piling even more unreasonable tasks onto Nancy. He'd dump reports on her right before closing time or assign stressful complaint handling, almost as if he was trying to wear her down to stop her from digging any deeper. Lately, Nancy looked like she had lost some weight because of it. And here she was, working late again. "Nancy, let me help you." "It's okay. If you stick with me, Chris might start targeting you too." "I don't mind. You haven't done anything wrong." At my words, Nancy let out a rare, pleased chuckle, saying, "Heh, thanks." Then she showed me a screen on her computer. It was a spreadsheet listing the suspected employees involved in the fraud and the amounts they'd altered. Even with the harassment, Nancy had been gathering proof of the misconduct on her own. I don't like just sitting back and taking it. I couldn't help but smile admiringly at her resilience, even when under pressure. But we're still short on enough proof to corner them. "Then I'll help. Just say the word." However, her response was vague. "I can't put any more of this burden on you." It was clear she was keeping a boundary, and I felt the distance between us. Maybe I still wasn't someone she could truly rely on. A few days later, something terrible happened. Nancy had collapsed. Apparently, the work Chris had piled onto her had kept her at the office until late at night. On her way home, she fainted from exhaustion and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. I was devastated. I'd wanted to help her, but that day, when I offered to stay, she'd said she was fine, and I had just left it at that. Why didn't I insist on staying, even if she said no? Thankfully, her life wasn't in danger, but Chris seemed almost pleased at her collapse, as if he wanted to say, "Serves her right." I was furious. Why should someone doing the right thing be driven to the breaking point, while someone doing wrong gets to laugh? I'll do whatever it takes. Now that Nancy had fallen, I was the only one who truly understood the situation. I decided to go all in and made a call. A few days later, I received an email from Nancy asking me to visit her at the hospital. I knew she was supposed to be hospitalized for a while, but I wondered if something had happened. Worried, I postponed the rest of my work to the next day and left the office on time. When I entered her hospital room, Nancy greeted me with a smile from her bed. Her condition was improving, and she'd be able to go home soon. Relieved that everything was fine, I couldn't help but notice someone who'd been on my mind. It turned out that Nancy already had a visitor in her room before I arrived. And of course, I recognized him. After all, he's the top of our company. Nancy's father, the company president himself. May I ask why President Brown is here?" I asked hesitantly. Incidentally, President Brown is often traveling nationwide, so we rarely see him in person. Seeing him for the first time in a while, I felt extremely nervous. Then President Brown spoke up. "Actually, my daughter asked me to come here." Hearing that, I turned to look at Nancy, stunned. Their last names were the same, but since it's a common name, I hadn't thought much of it. Yes, Nancy was the president's daughter. I was still processing this surprising revelation when President Brown greeted to thank me. "I heard you helped my daughter. She's always had a tendency to take on too much." As it turned out, Nancy had been investigating fraudulent money flows on her father's orders. Both Nancy and the president suspected manager Chris, but they'd struggled to gather any concrete proof to pin on him. "No matter what we do, we can't get the final evidence. We find traces, but nothing to definitively point to him as the culprit. What should we do?" When he said this, I responded, "Actually," and took out some documents from my bag. Both of them stared in astonishment as I showed them the files. This is definitely evidence of the fraud. It even lists employees involved from the client side. Where did you get this information?" Nancy asked, almost grabbing me in her eagerness, so I carefully explained how I'd obtained it. While Nancy had been tracking inflated numbers from various angles, her solo efforts had slowed her investigation and limited how much she could uncover. So, I decided to rely on others. I reached out to contacts in HR and accounting to trace manager Chris's past business transactions. I noticed that starting from a certain period, billing amounts to specific clients had increased. Instead of asking the client's representative, I confirmed with accounting and found evidence of inflated invoices. After hearing the whole story, Nancy was speechless for a moment, then let out a soft laugh. "You've become someone amazing. Thank you truly." For the first time, I had been able to support my mentor. It was one of the most gratifying moments of my life. President Nancy then said he would swiftly bring appropriate consequences to the employees involved in the fraud. Soon, several employees were dismissed from the company, including manager Chris himself. It turned out he had orchestrated the whole scheme. motivated by a desire to safeguard his managerial position, boost his achievements, and fund his lifestyle. Some of the other employees were also dragged into it by manager Chris's persuasion, convinced by a group mentality that it's safe if we all do it together. What started as just a few $100s escalated until it was blatant enough to catch external attention. For someone who always lorded over others, it was a fitting end. A few days later, I was summoned to the president's office. Nancy was there too, and I received her thanks once more. There was one thing I was curious about, though. Why had Nancy kept her identity as the president's daughter a secret from everyone? When I asked, she gave an answer that was so very Nancy. Because if people knew, they wouldn't see me for who I really am, right? I didn't want to be judged through that lens. Seeing her hold her head high with pride, I glanced over at the president. He shrugged as if to say, "That's my daughter." "But Nancy," he continued, "your strong-willed nature and your integrity in standing against wrongdoing are admirable, but not relying on others is a flaw. Learn to depend on people like him. You have plenty of people watching out for you, willing to help." Hearing this, Nancy seemed to reflect a bit. "You're right. I should have asked for Richard's help sooner, so will you continue helping me from now on?" Tilting her head slightly, Nancy made my heart skip a beat. It felt like the first time I'd seen her so honest. Was it because her father was here? Or was it because I'd become someone she could trust? Either way, flustered by her words, I replied, "Of course." After manager Chris and the others were dismissed, the company shifted to a new structure. The atmosphere changed dramatically, becoming a more comfortable and welcoming place to work than ever before. It's surprising how much difference it makes just having him gone. He truly had a negative influence on those around him. And there was another change. Nancy, once known for her strict demeanor, seemed to soften up. Maybe the recent incident inspired her to change a bit too. As a result, Nancy became more admired by everyone. Already beautiful, with her personality now more approachable, it was inevitable that she'd start getting more attention. Once whispered about for a late marriage, Nancy was now surrounded by admiration, and I found myself feeling a mix of emotions. "What are you doing, Richard?" Suddenly, Nancy called out to me with a smile. It's almost unfair to see her looking so adorable. My heart raced, and I felt my face heating up. Where my love story goes? Well, that's a tale for another day.